Hello, ladies and gentlemen. I am Dr. Claudia Albers, Planet X research and professional physicist. And today I'd like to bring to you another one of my articles. This one is entitled Planet X, New Moons and Planetary Formation. Now, the evidence that large numbers of very large objects belonging to the Planet X system has been arriving in the solar system for many years now is undeniable. These objects, which have also been given the name of stellar cores, have been observed in the Sun's corona for many years now and are very large. Most are comparable in size with Jupiter and some are larger than the Sun. However, smaller objects have been observed as well. And here we see some of these objects. These are not the largest ones. You can see this root-like connection that they usually make with the Sun, through which they draw matter and energy from the Sun with this one. And we can see another one here in the Sun's corona. It seems to be even smaller than that one. Now, stellar cores appear to be dead or energy depleted stars and planets, and therefore must come in many different sizes, so that small sized stellar cores are likely to be among the members of the system. And since this seems to be a large agglomeration of different star systems which have been destroyed and assimilated, it is very likely that there are a huge number of small moon-sized stellar cores in the system. You may look at Article 244 entitled The Planet X System, Destroyer of Star Systems for more details. The solar system has 8 full-size planets, 5 smaller planets called dwarf planets, and until a few years ago it was believed to have about 60 moons. So any large agglomeration of dead star systems is likely to have many thousands of moon-sized objects. As I have detailed in many previous articles, the observation of the stellar cores in the Sun's corona has led me to the realization that planets and stars are not that different, as they both have solid dense cores and generate energy in their cores as a result of radioactive decay. The main difference is therefore size, as the larger objects are able to generate a strong electric field in their outer layers, which allows them to emit large amounts of light and have particle creation events known as solar flares and CMEs. You may look at Article 283 entitled Planet X, Planets, Stars, and Black Holes for more details. When they run out of energy, they lose their outer layers until the core is exposed. And then in death, as in life, the basic difference between those that were stars and those that were planets will be size. But otherwise, they will most likely look like the blue stellar core, which was observed through a telescope, and which looked quite messy as it shed its remaining outer layer clinging to its core. And here we see the object. You can see the large amount of debris that's floating out around it and in front of it. And this material is what made up these stripes, which the object is losing. So it's losing this last layer of material clinging to the surface of the core. And you can see in this black and white image how all this debris seems to be floating out in front of the object here. Now, the number of moons in the solar system seems to have greatly increased in recent years. The increase is usually attributed to simply discovering moons that had already been there. But it is more likely that most of these moons have been gained as a result of the invasion of the solar system by the Planet X system. And here we see the original number of moons that each of the planets had, and the current number of moons. No changes are detailed for Earth and Mars. It may have changed. We may just not have been given the information. But Jupiter used to have 16 moons, and now, well, just a few weeks ago, I thought it had 67. Now I looked it up. It seems to now have 79. Saturn had 20, now has 62. Uranus had 15, now has 27. Neptune had 8 and now has 14. So Jupiter at the moment has 53 named moons and 26 awaiting confirmation. But just a few months ago, Jupiter was believed to only have 67. Now the number has gone up to 79 in just a few short months. Is this due to the use of new powerful telescopes, which are allowing us to discover new moons? Not likely. Jupiter has been explored by probes and examined in minute detail for decades. So this increase in moons is not likely to be due to the use of better telescopes and observation methods, but due to the increase in moon-sized objects, which are part of the Planet X system, entering the solar system and becoming energy bound to the planets as well as to the sun. But are all of these moon stellar cores that were once small celestial objects and have now become small stellar cores, or are additional moons being formed inside the solar system? The stellar cores shed large amounts of material coming from their layers of material above the core, and are therefore always surrounded by dust and debris of various sizes. And this is what we saw in these two images of the blue stellar core. So these objects shed these layers of material because they are energy depleted, and energy is associated to gravity. As the energy in the form of photons inside the particles making up the object decreases, the gravitational attraction between these particles also decreases. This means that the objects lose the ability to attract their own matter and thus expand. The top layers break up and eventually float out into space. The shed matter is also very low in energy and will thus not be attracted to the sun or any other solar system objects. However, the shed stellar core matter, as it absorbs photon, will most likely gain energy and get hotter to the point that it may become molten and self-gravitate into a spherical object. Or in the absence of enough energy, it may partially self-gravitate, as the newly discovered small moons of Saturn seem to have done. The transformation of stellar core matter shed by the larger stellar cores into moons will further increase the number of moon-sized objects within the solar system. And here we see 3 of the newly discovered moons of Saturn. These were discovered by Cassini, the last probe to visit Saturn. And these objects look like what you would expect material shed by the stellar cores, which may have been in the form of flakes of rocky material, would turn into if they had only enough energy to partially self-gravitate. So that the center becomes more spherical. You can see the center is more spherical, but the outer edge remains depleted in energy and is thus not attracted enough to the center of the object to be drawn in. So it stays in the shape of a flake. And therefore we get this incomplete sphere forming. Now, the shape of these moons also shows that the accretion of matter theory for the formation of planets cannot be correct. As I explained in article 215 entitled Dark Matter, Galactic Evolution and Star Formation, stars and planets come from ejections of galactic nuclei. Their ejections may, however, first condense into star clusters, which slowly separate into individual stars and planets. You may look at Article 288 entitled Image of Center of the Milky Way Galaxy reveals how the universe works. And this would require stars to fission. This would mean that a core would have to split into 2 cores and less dense material to quickly from it and around it. Planets, which are just smaller objects than stars, would thus form in the same way, and therefore simply emerge from inside a parent star when it is still young. Even smaller objects may then also emerge from the parent star, which end up orbiting the planets. These will be the moons in that system. These will all be spherical objects and must therefore be molten initially and self-gravitate into spherical objects with a dense spherical core and less dense layers around the core. But where would asteroids and comets come from? These may simply be the crumbs that may also be ejected by stars as they fission into smaller objects that they did not manage. They're so small that they did not manage to self-gravitate into a spherical object. However, even these objects, when they have highly elliptical orbits, can slowly, over many passes through the inner star system, accumulate matter ejected by the central star and eventually become one of the planets in that system. And you may look at Article 169 entitled Planetary Formation, Comets to Planets for more details. The fact that the Planet X system may have many small moon-sized stellar cores in it, and the likelihood that the material shed by these objects may also self-gravitate into moon-sized objects, explains why Jupiter has experienced such a huge increase in the number of moons. We would also expect the Earth to gain quite a few of these moons, which would then explain the unprecedented tidal events that have been occurring on Earth, and why the powers that be have resorted to showing pink and red moons. It is likely that only through projecting moon features on these objects that they can hope to deceive an observer on the ground into thinking that they are seeing the Earth's natural moon, when in fact they are seeing a stellar core matter moon, which is absorbing energy and thus emitting pink or red light. In conclusion, the Planet X system of stellar cores seems likely to have brought in a large number of moon-sized stellar cores into the solar system, which may have become energy bound to the planets like Jupiter and Saturn. In addition, the material shed by the stellar cores may also self-gravitate or partially self-gravitate, as in the case of some of the new moons of Saturn, into objects which will then become moons to the planets in the solar system. It is also likely that the Earth has gained some of these moons. And here are the references. This is Dr. Claudia Albers, Planet X physicist. Thank you for watching.